Yeah, our next speaker is Mr. Sumeet Kapur, who is the CEO, founder, Global Groupware and EmployWise. Small bio. Sumit is a serial entrepreneur with over 22 years of experience in starting, growing, and managing technology ventures. And he's been in the forefront of cloud wave in the country and has played a pivotal role in sensitizing organizations on the value of SaaS initiatives and helping them automate business processes such as employee and customer relationship management. He's graduated from the University of Delhi and earned his MBA from XLRI Jamshedpur. So I'd like to, and of course, the topic that he would be covering is evolution of SaaS, a perspective from an ISV. It's over to you, Sumit.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. There doesn't seem to be too many everybody's here, but just a quick thing. This is, unlike many of the other presentations here today, is not a vendor presentation, in as much as I am not here to actually sell any cloud product, but we are, of course, a part of the cloud because we are a SaaS company. But my sense of being here today was to actually share experiences as an independent software vendor moving to the cloud. So before I start, just a quick question. Is there anybody from a product software company here? You're from a product software? Great. Anybody else wanting to become a product software company? Aspirations? Okay. Good. So we have at least two people who are directly interested in perhaps the journey that we've had. I'll just go through a few slides and hopefully we can interact a little more after that. So as a company, we specialize in what we like to call relationship management. So we help companies manage their relationships with their customers and with their employees. Fundamentally, these are the two human dimensions of business. And in many ways, employees are also referred to as internal customers. And to that extent, we are distinct from the larger family of what we generally call ERPs. I think ERPs have done a good job of managing stuff that's inanimate, materials, money, and they do a pretty good job of that. But managing human relationships has always been a bit of a challenge for them. And that's why a whole genre of CRM and talent management has grown outside that domain. And we've come from that school of thought, and we therefore work both on the CRM and the EmployWise side, and the employee side. So the two products we have are Smile CRM, which is both of them are life cycle products. So one manages the customer life cycle, the other manages the employee life cycle. Both are SaaS. One is multi-tenant, the other is both multi-tenant and multi-instance, and I will talk a little about why it is like that. Right. So this talk is really about what sort of drove us to this space and why did we get into the cloud where we are today. We started as a product software company way back in 1998 when we used to sell a very strong workflow-based application called Smile CRM. CRM in those days was still very new. In 98, Mark Benioff of Salesforce.com was still holidaying in India trying to figure out what to do. Siebel, nobody had heard of. And at that point in time, we used to work on the Lotus Domino platform, Lotus Notes Domino, because that was the predominant workflow application platform. But what was also interesting, and I don't know if any of you remember that, or at least were of an age where you would have remembered that. I need to remember that more and more now when I talk. That was the age where replication was very powerful. So today we don't think of replication because we are always connected to the internet. We are always connected to our data. We are always connected to our applications. All we need is an internet connection on our phone or on our computers. But that's not how it always was. So there used to be a big challenge of being able to connect to your data and to your application. And connectivity was very hard to get and very, very expensive. So it was having VPNs and VSAT networks was the preserve of a few large corporations who could afford to spend that kind of money. And at that point in time, any application that could give you the kind of capability to have near real-time data on your system, not real-time obviously, but as good as that, on your system without having to connect anywhere was a very powerful value proposition. And Lotus Domino used to do that very well through its replication. So that's where we came in. We also came in very strong on workflows, because anybody who worked with Domino would understand that all you did with Domino applications was do the workflow engines, the escalation notifications. And these are, again, things that pretty much we take for granted in today's applications. But earlier applications weren't like this. In earlier applications, you had to go pull down an exception report, do something, go and do something in the morning, go and do something in the app. The application didn't talk to you. Email and your application were two different islands, and they weren't really integrated. So that's the period. We decided very early on that as a company, we would not only be a product software company, we would also leverage what was then called the application service provider model. So the application service provider model, or the ASP model, as it was known at the turn of the century, was just catching on, and we decided that that held a lot of promise, and that we would want to build our applications in that platform. So we decided at that point in time to switch over from Lotus Domino onto Java, and we chose the IBM middleware, DB2 and WebSphere, as our preferred platforms for building these applications. So we rewrote our entire application on the Java platform for deploying over the internet. At that point in time, obviously, we were still what is now called a hybrid model. So you could buy our application, run it on your servers, or we could install it on hosted servers. And we actually launched the Domino version in ASP model first. So we ran that for just under a year, as early as about end 2000, I think. And therefore, we were among the first ASP applications coming out of the country. We then switched to a Java-based application, again on hosted data centers. It was very interesting in those days. We used to go to tell customers, and they would say, where is this running? And this was running in Houston on an Intel data center. So that was pretty interesting for those days. Interesting also for our system administrators. None of us had ever been to Houston. So nobody had any idea where our physical servers actually are. We had never seen them. So, and we are talking about 2000. Today that's passé. Everybody knows cloud and data centers and remote management and stuff like that. But in 2000, you pretty much had your server right in front, and you sat on the console and you did everything. We launched our HR application in 2004. And again, this was a multi-instance application. It was called Smile CRM. So we did CRM extension into employee management. So this was employee relationship management, that was customer relationship management. And this product worked well for us, got early customers. But in 2006, we decided that we will firmly commit ourselves exclusively to SaaS. So we started rewriting the application from scratch. So this application is a multi-tenant application. And other than that, very, very usability driven. So the two things that really changed was, one was multi-tenancy, the other was usability. Till that point in time, usability, like even today to many people, for us meant user interface. But by that time, we had understood the power of usability in not just making an application easy to use, but in revolutionizing the way your business model works. I think the other significant transition as a business was that in 98, 2000, we used to look at the West as our market, and India didn't really matter. Happened, didn't happen, didn't happen. Like most software guys, we used to think of our markets outside the country. But by the time we started work on EmployWise, we recognized that India is a huge market, and that we need to be in this market. But the drivers of this market are very, very different. So to give you a sense, when we launched this application, the Smile CRM application, we used to charge 2,000 rupees a user a month. right? And there was really nothing to compare because there was no other ASP in India. The closest we had as a benchmark was Salesforce.com, and in those days, Salesforce was still at $50. And roughly we said, fine, we are still 500 rupees better than Salesforce.com. But that's the kind of complete blinded insight to the Indian market that we had at that point in time. I mean, we are not alone. I know that pretty much everybody in the software industry always talked in dollars. Nobody talks in rupees. Even your VCs talk to you in dollars. They still do. But when we did EmployWise, right, we launched EmployWise finally in 2008. And we launched it at 25 rupees a user a month. So that is the order of difference if you're trying to address the domestic market. And if you really want to go after the so-called, bottom of the pyramid, then you have to really change a whole lot of perspectives in your own head. And that's how the technology, the design gets driven. Because to be profitable at 25 rupees leaves you very little money to train users. And that's how usability becomes a complete business driver. So that's how multi-tenancy becomes a business driver. So a whole lot of these things that I'm going to talk about today, you have to recognize these are opportunities for us to leverage, not just because they are good things to do, but they're absolutely imperative if you're going to go after the kind of market that we are in India. And finally, in 2011, we actually migrated from data centers to a virtualized cloud environment. And again, we went with IBM. So, unashamedly, I'm a huge IBM fan as an ISV. I have worked with them for almost all the time that we've been existing as a software company. We've worked with IBM as a partner. Not that we haven't tried others. We've tried to get into ISV programs of others and evaluate them, but we've always come back to IBM. And again, when the time came to opt for the cloud, we evaluated everybody and came back to the smart cloud. So our SaaS journey in that sense, I talked about it a little bit. So, this is a large word to use. There is nobody who actually certifies you as a pioneer. But looking at who I knew who was doing the same thing as I was doing, I think we are right to call ourselves pioneers. We did it very, very early. And most importantly, we've stuck to it and we've survived. So there are only two other kinds of people. Either they didn't stick to it or they didn't survive, right? So my peers of that 99, 2002 mostly fall in that category. Very few of them have continued. And one of the things that we did was we have come from the same background that most product software companies are. I mean, the new software companies today don't actually do on-premise. Today, a whole lot of products are actually coming out in their first versions from concept to readiness in the cloud, right? And that's, so this doesn't apply to them, but to anybody who's moving from an on-premise to a SaaS, it's not about taking the code and loading it on a web server. In fact, it's anything but that. It's about completely reorganizing, redesigning your application, not just porting. And that's the big difference. And therefore, both our journeys from on-premise to SaaS were recoded from scratch rather than ported. We've also been multi-instance. We are multi-tenant. So we've seen both sides of the game. Those of you who are interested in SaaS and are part of some discussion forums will see that there's a lot that goes on this debate between multi-tenancy and multi-instance and which is better, which is not. But we are firmly on the multi-tenancy side of the business. And also from a hybrid business model to a pure SaaS business model. And that's, again, a very significant business decision that a product software company takes when you're moving to the cloud now. A little about the company that paid the bill for me to get here. We are a Beacon Award winning, the company is incidentally my own company. So it's not IBM who paid my bill, so just before you start getting ideas. We are a Beacon Award winning product. Those of you who are familiar with IBM, this is a global award that IBM gives across the world in 13 different categories. And in the SaaS category, we won this award in 2008. These are some of the companies that use our multi-tenant SaaS application for HR, which is the product called EmployWise. So all these companies use EmployWise in some shape or form today. And why I put this up was essentially to give you a sense that there are no categories of who SaaS is for. People talk about SaaS being for SMBs, SaaS being for enterprises. In this list, you will see all kinds of names. We have customers as small as a few tens of employees, and we have customers who have thousands of employees. And there is no demographic that divides you as a user of SaaS or cloud from not using SaaS or cloud. I think it's more a behavioral and a mindset thing than a demographic thing. Okay, so when you look at moving to the cloud, and especially the SaaS part of the cloud, what are some of the key things that you have to decide? I talked about multi-tenancy. So the difference between multi-tenancy, multi-instance, largely is the ability for you to make a different version of your application for a customer. As a software company, you will have almost no reason to not be multi-tenant. From a software company's point of view, from an ISV's point of view, every single benefit comes from being multi-tenant, and very little comes from being multi-instance. The only reason you would want to be multi-instance rather than multi-tenant is if your market situation, your product category, or your customer base requires that of you. And fundamentally, there are two broad issues that determine this from the client side. There is the security aspect. So some people think that, no, I must have my version of the database, I must have my version. Personally, I'm not a huge buyer of that logic. I have talked to companies of all shapes and forms. I have had these conversations with CIOs. I have opened up our systems and our security, and I've shown to them that security does not necessarily come by physically creating two versions or physically separating customers. Logically separating customers can be equally secure, right? But the bigger challenge is requirements. So if you are going to be multi-tenant, you are either deciding to go after a very homogeneous market set, which means this is what I do in my application, and therefore it is good for these customers. If you want something else, just too bad, either compromise or I can't do it for you, go to another application provider. But if you want to cover a larger swathe of the market, then you have to actually build your application architected for a very high degree of configurability. That complicates things enormously when it comes to an application. It increases the cost of development. It also takes away the luxury of learning customer after customer. You have to actually understand the entire complexity upfront, or to a large extent, you have to understand the complexity upfront to be able to architect for it. Otherwise, you're going to find yourself adding rooms to a building whose foundation does not actually, is not designed to take that many rooms, and your plumbing will fail one day, or all kinds of problems start happening. So you need to know this. We were lucky, lucky in the sense that I've seen CRM, I've seen HR, and I feel that fundamentally HR lends itself that much more to multi-tenancy. HR practices tend to be very cross-industry. But even within that, there is configurability. So if you happen to take a demo, you need to just go to employwise.com, take a tour, and you will get a sense of how much configurability is built in, because even then, no two customers do things the same way. And all of it is possible through configurability. This is also very critical from your business model. So the traditional software P&L is a 33-33-33 P&L, where 33% revenue comes from license, 33% from services, which are implementation, customization, and 33% from AMCs and recurring revenues of that sort. A typical SaaS P&L is nearly 90% subscription revenues, and only about 10% of things like implementation charges and stuff like that. customization does not actually become a revenue source. Now, as a business, you need to take that call. If you're willing to give up on that, then yes, multi-tenancy works very well. But if you want to actually keep making money off your customers by doing customizations, and that's okay with your customers, it's okay with you, and that's really how you want to do it, then you're better off doing a multi-instance, which gives you full flexibility of doing what you want to do. It's much easier for me to tell a customer that I'm not going to charge you anything, but what I do will be with some limitations. But it's very hard to tell a customer that you're going to pay for everything, but I still have limitations. Right? So in that sense, you need to take this call. Choice of middleware and platforms is again very critical, because this obviously determines your scalability, which is critical to SaaS, especially if you're multi-tenant. Obsolescence, end of the day, all the issues that people have with technology, you have to recognize that these issues do not go away. All SaaS is doing is gathering all the problems that your customers have with technology and putting it in your lap. And you have to manage it. You have to manage all these issues, and you have to work with that. We had a choice between open source and vendors, and we eventually decided to go with a vendor rather than with open source, though I do find a lot of SaaS happening on open source. But for us, it was a very simple thing. We were building a serious application for companies who were going to move serious operations onto it. If something went wrong, we wanted to make sure that we are not left high and dry, and there is somebody we can fall back on who is technologically sound, and that's why we chose the vendor approach, and obviously our vendor was IBM. So hosting was a big one, deciding that we will not be hosting our own applications. So the original ASPs and some of the early SaaS guys all have their own data centers. So even today, I think most of the Western SaaS companies have very large data centers of their own. But we from day one decided this is not our core competency, and we will not do it ourselves. So we've always worked with data centers right through, and now we work on the cloud. Scalability, agility are the two biggest drivers for doing this. And we believe that we get a lot of scalability and agility, which is speed. So it's not just hypothetical scalability, it's also scalability within hours. So when a customer signs up and they decide they're going to go live, the time we take an implementation time that can range from 3-4 days to 20 days, neither of which is sufficient for you to buy a high capacity server. You need 4 weeks, 6 weeks lead time. So we need to build up capacity like this, sometimes in hours, okay? Because we suddenly find that this is a season for performance management appraisals to be happening, and suddenly there will be a surge in capacity. You will just get hours before the server starts going into red, and you can augment capacity. So you need to be able to throw in, and that's really what led us to move to the cloud from dedicated hosting that we used to do earlier. And also the financial structure, because we wanted to take CapEx out of the equation. A lot of SaaS and ASP especially died because they had a weird model. They did the CapEx on their cost side, and they got a recurring OpEx on the revenue side. So if you're going to earn in an OpEx model but spend in a CapEx model, you've got to have a big sugar daddy behind you, because it's not going to work out in your business. We decided, therefore, we would not go the CapEx way. And obviously, the choice between cloud and dedicated. It's not just a cloud, it's also a question of readiness. You actually have to be ready to move to a virtualized hosting environment and understand how clouds work, because a lot of things are different between clouds and conventional data center dedicated servers. And obviously, everybody from Amazon to Rackspace, IBM, and plenty of others are out there. Some of them are outside talking about their services. So you need to figure out who you're going with. Who we went with is pretty obvious. And I'm sure offline I can share with you if any of you are interested why we did that. But in IBM, we found a huge reassurance. Right? One of the big things that we found, not only is their technology and stuff good, but it's very powerful to tell a customer CIO that you're hosted on the IBM cloud, that your software is on the IBM middleware. All questions stop. That's the last question they ask you, because there's no doubt with that. Okay, then your go-to-market models matter. Which markets are you going after? So those decisions as a SaaS company we had to take. Who will we be selling to? Whether we will do digital, non-digital. So I'm not going to go so much in the marketing, because largely you're more interested, I guess, in the technology side of the business. But This has direct bearing on your technology. So the way you architect and build your product determines the amount of support that you are expecting to give or people will need to have. And that impacts your business model. That impacts how you're going to deliver support. One of the biggend problems with going hybrid is that you end up being two companies. One company that is building on-site support, the other that is working on backend. So this is pretty much what I had to say. I guess we are running out of time, so I don't know if you want me to do question and answers, or do we have like a minute? Sure. Sorry, how do we do user management?
For example, a company may have its own user base, and they might want to sync it with your SaaS. How do you do it?
So it's interesting because in the HR application, we are the user base. We get to know a user of a company before the company gets to know it, because you hire the person in EmployWise. Okay, but otherwise we have a whole web services layer around our application that allows you to integrate. So we do performance management in some companies where we are not the HRIS, but there's a whole web services layer. So integration, I'm glad you asked that question. So integration is a very vital part of becoming a SaaS application. And we have a very, very robust, there's a lot of money that's gone into building a very robust library of web services. So you can pretty much do anything from share and give and take data and do transactions in our system using the web services layer. Any other questions?
For the platform, was it a homegrown platform or did you use any vendor? The SaaS platform that...
You're talking about middleware?
Middleware.
Oh, we use IBM middleware.
Okay.
We use
on top of that, did you use any SaaS platform or it was homegrown by your team?
Okay, so I'm not...
For the CRM,
I'm not enough of a techie, but let me rephrase it the way I understand. Below the... So let's okay, there's EmployWise, that's the application, that's us.
Right.
We write that. Below that is middleware, which is IBM.
Okay.
Below that, I have no idea.
There's
It's the cloud.
There's nothing in between.
It's as simple as that. So I don't really bother below the middleware. After that, it's the cloud provider's problem. Anything else?
Going to be a journey. When you say it's a SaaS model, it's going to be a journey between your client and the service provider. Probably it will be years together. How you are going to streamline the relationship with the way of service you are going to provide them? What are the key factors?
Well, fundamentally, let's put it like this. It's a marriage with divorce looming around all the time, right? You have not spent $1 million to buy my license. My contract has no exit barriers whatsoever, right? Just like a marriage contract, you can start divorce filings the very next day. Whether you do it or not depends on how the relationship pans out. But understand there are no bindings. There are no barriers. So yes, there is a bit of a exit barrier because you're running your processes, your data is there. But understand that our contract specifically says the data belongs to the customer, never belongs to us. So this, in SaaS, you have to understand you have to win your customer every day. Every day you have to win your customer because your customer can just walk out anytime they want. Nothing stops them.
How do you deal with this configurability versus customization? Won't customers ask for specific tweaks in their rules, like the appraisal rules will differ from companies to companies?
So we have enormous configurability in our application.
Can customers plug in their own solution logic to kind of address their specific requirements?
So see, we are not just a software company, we're also a domain company. So we understand performance management, how it happens, 360-degree reviews, how they happen, how they are used, and there are just so many ways in which they can be done. Everything is a rule in EmployWise. There's a rule for everything, and when we discover something that we don't do, we have an open to public forum where people can come and say, your product doesn't do this, I'd like it to do that. We crowdsource from there, we take that into our development roadmap, and we make product releases every Monday. So we don't do 2 releases a year. We do 52 releases a year. So the probability that what you want and what you want gets voted by others. So if it's a feature you want and other customers also want, and on top of that, we have something called an accelerated development model. So if it's something that you want, nobody else in the world seems to want it, you can pay for it, but it's not a customization. It'll come as a configurable feature and become available to everybody, except that you will pay for it because you can't wait for it. thank you very much. It's a pleasure being here, and have a good session there.
Yeah, I'd like to thank Mr. Kapur for his insights into this topic, and would also like to give away a small token of appreciation. So if you could just.
Sure. Photo time. Thank you. Thank you very much.